Hello, this is Paula Monty here.
And Sara Haboobi here too.
We would both like to welcome you to the Jumpstarting process for reading. If you're doing this course, it probably means that you and your child have experienced success with the Jumpstarting for Spelling process. If so, we'd love to hear about your experiences and would appreciate your feedback, which you can post on the site. If you have any questions or concerns, please get in touch via the email address provided.
But before we begin, we just want to make sure that before starting this course, you haven't somehow managed to skip modules 1 and 2 of the Jumpstarting process for spelling course. You see, for reasons that will become clear as we go through, you really need to know the background to our approach and how to get mental imagery under control through grounding, which is all in module 1, and also how to learn to spell new words, which is in module 2 of the Jumpstarting process for spelling course. So before we start, please make sure you have completed modules 1 and 2, the Jumpstarting for spelling process, that you've mastered grounding for yourself and your child, and you can do this really easily and quickly, and your child can now spell using the Jumpstarting process.
So this course, the Jumpstarting process for reading, is in 6 parts. Part 1 is an introduction to reading and the brain. In Part 2, we look at how we learn to read. Part 3 is about preparing to read with your child. And in Part 4, we take you through how to conduct a reading session. Part 5, we look at how we remember what we read. And in Part 6, we talk about moving forward.
So, before you start, as with everything that we're teaching, being grounded at the start of learning something new is really, really important. And I'm sure you know how to do that really well at this stage. So, just get your feet flat on the ground, imagine your roots going deep into the ground, take a nice big deep breath in and out, and let's begin.
So, Part 1. An introduction to reading and the brain. On the next 2 slides, you'll see some typical problems that struggling readers experience. Do any of these sound familiar to you? Or perhaps your child sounds a word out, gets it right, but then just doesn't recognise it later on the same page. Perhaps your child can sound out longer, regular words, for example, even something like handbag or camera, hippopotamus even, but not words such as enough, once, watch, where, and even a seemingly easy word such as the. Perhaps your child can identify the basic individual sounds, but can't join those sounds together to make the whole word. And sometimes your child might make wild guesses which just simply don't make sense within the context of the text. Perhaps your child misses out whole words or whole lines, or reads very slowly trying to sound out the words, but there's no flow. Perhaps it doesn't stop at punctuation marks, reads with no expression. Perhaps your child can't remember what they've read. Does your child get very tired? And perhaps your child gets a headache. An important question to ask is also whether you've had your child's eyes tested. There might be a physical problem that needs to be addressed, which may also be causing issues with reading.
So, how do we read? You might be a fluent reader yourself, or maybe you've experienced challenges. On the next 2 slides, we're going to ask you to read some text. It will look a bit odd at first, but just have a go at reading it. And as you work your way through, just notice what happens in your mind, your brain, and your body. Okay, so try reading this. Did you manage to make sense of it? What happened? This is actually what it says. How come your brain is able to understand this sentence, even though only the first and last letters of each word are correct? According to research at Cambridge University, it doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are, the only important thing is that the first and last letter be in the right place. The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole, and you thought spelling was important. Now, it is important to mention here that you could only make sense of that passage if, in fact, you already have the correct spelling of the word stored in your memory. And we've got another passage for you to read, and this one's even a little stranger. So have a go at this one. Again, remember to notice what happened to you as you tackled this task. This passage reads, "This message serves to prove how our minds can do amazing things, impressive things. In the beginning it was hard, but now on this line your mind is reading automatically without even thinking about it." Now again, without the correct version of the words, your brain wouldn't be able to make sense and be able to, in quotation mark, read the passage. So what happened for you in that last one? Most people find this more challenging than the first one. The numbers seem to get in the way for a while. But even then your mind seems to be able to make sense and read the words, even though they're not even written completely in letters. You see, reading is primarily a visual activity. We're going to explore that in more depth as we work through the course. And this is a great quote, and it comes from as far back as 1959, which sums the whole thing up, which is, if a child does not have a visual memory, he or she is never going to learn to read. The problem is, it has been known for a very long time that visual memory is vital for fluent reading, but no one thought it was possible to teach someone how to develop and improve it, well, until Olive Hickmott came along and showed how it could be done.
In order to read fluently, you need to be able to store words in your long-term memory, your word bank if you like, so that you can recognise them instantly when you come across them. If you have to keep on sounding out each word, you will just not become fluent, and reading will always be a difficult, slow process. Our Jumpstarting spelling process teaches you how to store words in your word bank, and this enables you to read faster and more fluently. So what do we mean by visual word bank? Well, firstly, let's think about the activity of reading. Reading is actually a fairly recent activity for the human brain, with alphabet-based scripts going back only a few thousand years, which is no time at all in the history of human development. Now, reading is a very complex activity, and as humans didn't evolve with a specific ability to read, the brain therefore has to use various existing parts in the process of reading. To enable these parts to work together, the brain has to form connections between them. Now, the word bank is at the centre of these connections.
So you might remember this slide from the spelling process. We discussed how 3 elements need to be in place to enable us to learn to spell words. We have to know the correct pronunciation, to understand the meaning of the word, and to visually recognise the whole word. And the same 3 elements need to be in place for reading. We need to be able to look at the letters and hear the sounds they make when spoken, make meaning from the words we read, and this is the vital piece. We need to be able to recognise words we have come across when we meet them again. This is actually called rapid automatic naming. Great! So, fantastic, you've finished part 1, and now we're ready to go on to part 2. We're going to discuss more about how we learn to read, and also how to develop fluency. So we'll see you in the next part.